but you'd lose a lot of that nuance. And I really wanted kind of a soft glowing thing. And so for that, you need like a light gray and then a dark gray in between your middle and your two extremes, black and white. I don't know if any of this is making sense, but this is sort of like how I think about it, how I approach it, and what I'm thinking as I'm doing it. And as far as like, as I'm working, I was thinking about this earlier, like how I would sort of describe like what my mind is doing. And it's definitely thinking, but it's not thinking in like a normal sort of thinking sense. It's very relaxed. It's not like strenuous necessarily. It's just kind of like problem solving. It's stimulated, but it's not overworked. And so, for me, that's a great place to be, is where you're kind of relaxed when you're in a groove, but your brain is being stimulated and challenged in like a non-threatening way. Like you're not being chased by a bear and having to figure out, which direction you have to go. It's like, okay, slightly less threatening, but you're still getting some brain exercise. So it's pleasant. It's not a struggle. The mind is actively thinking, and it's all happening in a relatively relaxed sort of thing. And I found like the more sort of demanding I make it for myself, then the less good my stuff is, or the less happy I am with it. So this is our 6th. This one's like an extreme close-up. So there's not much going on other than just the burning logs with a little bit of fire. In fact, the fire isn't, I'd argue, is not really the star of the show. It's more the placement of the logs and what's happening with, the negative space between them. All right. Thanks, Nikki. This one kind of reminded me of Franz Klein. If you guys know Franz Klein's work, he's one of my favorite modern artists. He's an abstract expressionist, and he has such a good design sense. And so I saw this and I thought I could do like a Franz Klein sort of thing. So if you want to look him up, he's worth knowing. That's really cool stuff. But so right now it doesn't look like much, and maybe it won't when it's done, but it is right now. I'm just thinking about, I don't want these all to be the same thickness. So I'm deliberately forcing myself to not make them the same, because the tendency is, they all have to be the same. Right now, it just feels kind of sporadic, but I am actually building up and thinking, because I don't want to go, like I said, too dark too quickly. And I am trying to create, though it is a little bit difficult to see in the photo reference being so small, I am trying to create a glowing effect. So it's kind of like a balance. It's a juggling act between balancing that they're dark enough, but then that they're glowing sort of on the edges, right? Because they are in fire. And then you're also wanting to create sort of this gradient illuminated effect on them. So there's all those things, and each one is different, and they all have those different things going on. So you have to be pretty varied with what you're doing. And so in this one, the background is the fire itself. I mean, there is a small little area that you'll see I'll add in the darks, but it's largely just the illuminated fire. And again, there is this sort of, my mentality is it's like a push and a pull until you find like the sweet spot. So you have to start somewhere. And this is more to do with painting. But you put something down and then you can make a judgment based on that. And you can, you have to push it forward. And if you take it too far, then you'll have to dial it back. And I call that pulling. And then you adjust it and you push it a little bit more until you finally settle on a place that actually works. And so not so much with markers, you can really only push. There's not a whole lot of like pulling back because once it's down, it's down. But it is sort of like a negotiation or a dance. And I kind of like that. If everything was like easy and settled, I don't think it would be as enjoyable. Because it's really discovery. And although it's challenging, I do ultimately like that. And you're making choices. And you have sort of this artifact of all the choices that you made. All right. Got a little learner here. What's your 5-year-old's name, Keith? Lulu. Hi, Lulu. Okay, so it looks like I missed a question. How do you judge and assign the value in a 3-value scale like this when the subject has a full range of values? Any tips? Okay. It's tough because that's where like your powers of discernment and your powers of editing are really going to matter, because you have to decide, looking at something, where it fits within those 3 values and making that sort of hold up. I mean, like I said, it's very limited with 3. In fact, I do have a 1 Copic marker. I didn't use it for this one, but sometimes, because it's not a 1 as in it's white, it's actually between the white of the paper and the 3 of the marker. So I guess it would be like value-wise, it'd be like a 1.5 on here. So it's in between there. But doing fewer than 5 would be a real challenge. And I don't know if you could really capture what's going on with the 5. It would just look flat. So some of these that I did, they're just very hard edged. They just have no sort of natural fire characteristics to them. And so this one you can see here, and the darks are very like demanding, which is why I generally don't like to have too many of them in the fire when the painting's about the fire. But this one, it's more about the logs and the shapes that they're creating, so they can be that dark, because that's the area I want to emphasize. And I just like that backlit sort of aspect. And so now for this one, you can see I'm working. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to gradually build that up a little bit, because it is sort of disappearing back into the fire. And so it can be, pretty daunting to think about, like, if you have a whole bunch of piles, like a big pile of sticks and branches and logs and stuff, sort of like being enveloped in the fire of all these edges. But some of, Lynn, will these studies be posted? Yeah, I think we can make that happen. Keith, can we post them someplace? Keith says yes. So I'll send you a high definition photo, Keith, and we can get it posted. Good question, Lynn. Lynn, is this Lynn?
Yes.
Well, that was a dumb question, but hi.
Hi.
Okay, and then Keith, the recordings of this lesson and the image of the finished design will be in the course for you to download. Sweet. All right, available. Okay, so we got 6 done. So that was that. And that was the whole point of that last one was, I mean, logs are boring, sticks are boring, but then when they're on fire, they're a lot more interesting. So that's kind of what I was about. Now, these 3, they're a bit pulled back. And so there's more happening around. And that's kind of what I was going for. They're also horizontally placed. So these are 3 inches by 5 inches. Do you guys use imperial measurement in Canada, or are you on the metric? You're metric, right?
We use both.
Okay, so you know what an inch is. Great.
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what it is in centimeters, like 18 by 32. I don't know. I think we should get on the metric system, but whatever.
Yeah, you definitely should.
Yeah. It's a lot easier. Okay, so 1 inch is 2.54. Yeah, I was way off. So this one I like because it has trees. It has, I like how we're in units of measurement now. Gotcha. So this has sky, it has a tree line, it has, a distant sort of ground area, and then it has the fire itself. And, the shape of the fire was pretty interesting, but I was more into, the spatial aspect of this and capturing that. And so, just kind of starting how I have in the past. And like I said, and you'll see this with the actual painting demonstrations, that I kind of approach them differently each time. So there's not like a prescribed way of doing it. And I prefer it that way. I don't really like formulas. It kind of loses the art in that way. I think, each piece should dictate how it's done, because for me, the process is just as important as the end result. In fact, I'm more interested in the process because like my personal thinking is if the process is good, then the end result, the product will be good. So it's about the journey, man, not just the destination. So now I'm taking, this is my number 7, and I'm shaping the trees to then fill in the sky color. So it's going to be a dark sky. Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought too. On their own individually, they don't necessarily look like fire, but then collectively all together, they have a definite fireness about them. So like right now, I'm just blocking in the sky. And I guess technically what I could do is I could just fill in that whole background area and then layer on top of it with my darker gray, which I will do. I'll fill in the trees with my darkest gray. But, in my mind, because I have that more mosaic sort of approach or mentality with it, I'm just thinking about, this shape here, this shape here, this shape here, and this there. Which is a very like unromantic approach to painting. But I had to come up with like a way to figure it out. And that worked for me. I had to boil it down in a way that was digestible and made sense. And that just kind of, that did it for me. So, right now I'm just jumping in, refining the edge of this very gestural fire, putting down, now this is the actual ground plane. Filling that in a bit. I'm also, as far as, my pace, I try to not rush, but I try to work pretty quickly. I try not to dwell necessarily. I like to figure it out, put it down, and then kind of move on. I'd say a brisk pace, but not reckless. So, I'd say work as fast as you can, as slowly as you can, not to the point where you're making mistakes, because that'll slow you down and frustrate you too. So, but you shouldn't just work slowly just because. So for me, and how I work, I like to not dawdle. So now I'm taking my darkest gray, filling in this area, and this is my tree line off in the distance. And it looks very flat because it is just this one single, dark gray. If I was working with more range, then you wouldn't want all these trees to be this dark. So if you wanted to create that atmospheric perspective, you would need like a value between the sky and the trees, just to create that distance, that illusion of depth. But some of that is lost because these are small little sketches and our limited range. Also, sometimes things just happen, and you want to embrace those when things come together and you can't really explain it. So you don't want to work so fast that you just kind of plow over them. So if, I think like Bob Ross called them happy accidents or something. If you're going like breakneck speed and you just paint over a really great space, then it's gone. Like tears in the rain. So you got to embrace those things, preserve them, and accept the offering of the art gods. So now we're taking these darks, and I'm being pretty deliberate and bold with them around the base, because I know that's going to be dark. I'm pretty confident in that. And then it's just kind of filling that in with that. So you can see in some cases, I'll do an area and then work up to the darks. But, you do enough of these and you can kind of, like I said, anticipate where your accents are going to go. Accents in this case, meaning the darkest darks. Then you can just be bold and put it down because but if you're not sure, then you should take a much more sort of careful approach. And I've tried to, they're very, very similar, let's be honest, but I've tried to, make them varied enough, and I've tried to explain them in different ways, because there is some variation there as far as how I approach them and how I finish them. Got just a couple more after this. Let's see if there's any questions. All right, looks like we got all the questions. Yeah, so that's something that is important to remember, is don't make, if things look flashy, they're not as flashy as we think they are. There's more to it than that. It's never that simple. And usually when we look at something and think of it as, really bright, it's for a reason. It's not just as simple as, and I used to think that, I used to think that, a rich, colorful painting is rich and colorful because, they use paint straight out of the tube. But that's not the case. It's like I said, it's all relative. And so you're having to sort of pull back in places you're making sacrifices in intensity in some areas so that you can bump it up in other areas. And so that's a really important thing. So you have to be pretty strategic and deliberate about those choices. And in some areas you want like high contrast, which is great. But then also, like, if you look at the subtlety of the ground and the tree and the sky, like those are really nice looking values, and they do sit back sort of in the darkness. So they're light enough to express the space, but they're dark enough that they all sort of disappear into the darkness if you're paying attention to the light. And that's really the sort of the effect of actually being there. If you're looking at the fire, because it's so bright, everything that's dark sort of blends together. But then if you look past the fire and into the dark, then all of a sudden you see the subtlety and the nuance. And I just like that idea. And, I talk about like headlights on a car. They don't change from daytime to nighttime. The difference is the middle of the day, obviously, you've got full sunlight, but then at nighttime, when that's absent, when you're in the dark, those headlights sure are bright. And so if you want the headlights bright, then you have to darken the sky. You have to darken everything around it. And it's an oversimplification, but it just kind of captures that idea of, if you want something to be, more, you have to bring something else down. It's all about give and take. I think that's about it for that one. So now the next one, nope, still going at it. Okay, so that was an area that was a little too light, so I'm just knocking it down. I don't want anything really to stand out other than my area of emphasis. The other good thing about Copic markers is you can like double up on your layers. So I'm making a second pass with this number 9, and it's darkening it quite a bit. Whereas if I would have left it, it would have stayed a little bit lighter. So you can make a couple passes and darken them. I have other alcohol markers, but these are the ones I have in grayscale.